So, Nathalie, we're detecting an accent here, and you've already admitted to coming from New Zealand, which is like on the other side of the world.
Yeah, like literally on the other side of the world.
What on earth has brought you to these fair shores?
Yeah, so I've been over here a long time, actually. It scares me sometimes how long, and I still haven't lost my accent, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Yeah, I came over in 2004, I want to say, and I was coming over to see the world, and at that time the pound used to be quite a good thing to earn. Things have changed somewhat since then, but I had a student loan to pay off, and so sending back pounds paid it off a lot faster. So yeah, that's the plan. I came over just originally, I think I was only going to come for a couple of years, and then I got distracted and stayed.
Wow.
So what did you get distracted by?
Just work, really. So when I first came over, I worked in the Channel Islands in Guernsey. So I was still doing mixed practice at that point. So I worked there for about 2 years. And then I thought I should go and do some travel. So I went backpacking around Europe for a while with a friend. And then I went back to New Zealand for summer and went back to my old practice for a bit of work there. And then I thought, well, I haven't finished with England yet. I haven't seen England because I was in the Channel Islands. So came back and locumed. And then I think I locumed for about 3 years. So that was nice. I really enjoyed that. I worked in a lot of different places, saw a lot of different things, gave up large animals completely. Because after getting called out in the middle of the night in the rain, I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. So
you do your rites of passage, don't you? 3 or 4 years of carvings at 2 a.m. By tractor light.
Yeah, this one was in the middle of a rainstorm to a cow that when I got there and checked her out, hadn't started properly carving yet. She managed to carve about 4 hours later on her own. And I think that was the point where I just went, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. So no, locuming was really nice. It's quite annoying now when I talk to people and they say, oh yeah, I'm from here. And I'm like, oh yeah, I work there. so I've definitely been around a lot of different places. So yeah, it was good. It was really good.
That's great. And then you went off to Edinburgh.
Well, not quite. So then I got a proper job. Then I got another proper job, and then I went off to Edinburgh. Actually, that was on the third proper job. Yeah. So when was that? In 2014, I think I decided it was time to start to do a bit more structured study again. So I enrolled at Edinburgh with the Masters in International Welfare, Ethics and Law, and I was doing that whilst working full-time in practice. So evenings and weekends. Well, evenings were often spent watching webinars and things, and then the weekends were usually spent doing all the reading and the writing. But yeah, I really, really started to enjoy.
So what course was that?
Again.
Law?
Yeah, animal welfare, ethics and law.
Right.
So animal welfare law primarily.
Okay, that's a little bit off the track from veterinary surgeon, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, we do have to uphold the law, especially the Animal Welfare Act. So, yeah, I found that part actually really interesting. It was just one of the sort of modules that was part of the program, but really interesting, especially when you look internationally at the variations in animal welfare law between countries. I think that's just fascinating. What, in some ways, what we have in the UK, we are. I think the animals are lucky compared to other parts of the world where just the standards, especially laboratory animals, really opened my eyes about, I don't think we have enough legislation, but we have some very good legislation, especially compared to the States where, it's just even within state and between whether you're a mouse in a research lab that's signed up to certain standards or not. And if you're unlucky enough to be a mouse in some of those circumstances, it was almost a bit of a free-for-all, really, about what they could do. This is obviously a few years back, so I'm hoping things are improving. But yeah, really surprising and really interesting.
It's not limited to mice, though, is it? In some of the states, and it's very much the case. I think some of the research that I wanted to do, the ideal would be to work with a certain species. Oh hell, man, that's not a problem. It's a problem everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
To bring that level of technology to work with that particular species, which we didn't do in the end.
and that's it. The EU legislation is very good, definitely compared to other parts of the world. And I mean, it was in the news quite recently that Britain had signed back up to animals being sentient again, and there was a lot of celebration. But then you're also just like, we had before. It's just there've been some law changes recently with certain things happening.
No, they went through a stage of no longer being sentient, I think, didn't they? There was a sort of ditheriness about their sentience.
They've lost their minds.
Which, I think any of us that hang out with animals on a daily basis are fairly happy about their sentience, really.
I think so.
And we're happy for every animal, every animal with fur or feathers to have feelings, aren't we? Unless it's a mice or a rat in our hen coop, then we can really just kill them as much as we want, and ideally cause some sort of pain. Although there are now moves, so glue traps are banned in this country now, and snap traps are getting some good footage.
What on earth are the Royal Estates going to do then? How on earth are they going to be able to provide all these animals to shoot at if they stop doing all of this stuff?
We'll just get Andy out and shoot the buggers.
It's definitely one of those things, isn't it? Death itself is not a welfare issue, but how animals die is. And I think it's one that actually comes up around the world, but definitely something that happens commonly to those of us from Australasia. Is the way some animals are classified as pets, and then if they're classified as a pest, it's a bit of a, not quite a free-for-all, but definitely types of poison are still commonly used. And it's this really tricky sort of ethical balance between trying to do the best you can for especially native species, where we're talking about the pests are introduced species and potentially devastating some of the native wildlife, but also recognising that these animals didn't ask to be introduced to these countries and have autonomy in their own right as well. So it's not the easiest, and definitely it's something that I keep an eye on in the New Zealand media, and there's similar debates going on in Australia and all around the world, where you've got sort of parts of the world. Cats obviously crop up a lot into this because they're often one of these introduced pest species, and they are exceedingly good hunters. So it is really tricky. Really tricky.
Do you have a view on this? Because you've brought into the conversation the government sponsored, or the New Zealand government sponsored, mass poisoning that goes on with the poison specially made from the government chemical works, which I think only makes that chemical, doesn't it?
It's 1080, I think, is still the one that's commonly being used. I have very weird ethics, because of where I'm from. So I'm quite utilitarian, but also I have quite a strong conservation streak. And I think that's partly coming from a country where not only do we have mainly birds, but our birds don't fly very well. So, they're only found, a lot of these birds are only found in New Zealand, and definitely pests have caused a significant issue. But so have also us as people. But to me,
wasn't the kakapo almost driven to extinction by rats introduced from Cook's ships?
Definitely, the brown rat has done an awful lot, and I mean the kakapo is a really good example of a bird that's only found in New Zealand that doesn't fly very well. It's also not great at breeding, I understand, either. So it takes its time.
Intricate little, some huge booming grounds, don't they?
I
saw it on Last Chance to See. Douglas Adams' book.
Right.
Douglas Adams and Mark Carradine, I think, wasn't it?
And I mean, we have the takahe as well in New Zealand that was thought to be extinct for quite some time, and then I think they discovered them again in the 1960s. So definitely to protect and re-establish a lot of these populations, pest control is required. My issue is more how they're doing it. So the poisons and things that they're doing aren't necessarily particularly humane and don't cause a terribly fast death. So there's definitely people out there researching more humane forms of pest control. And I think it's all about, the speed in which we can kill, as awful as it sounds. But yes. I think that is the issue, that actually, as long as we can minimise any suffering that goes on around some of these species, these introduced pest death. So that's just the best balance, really. If we can, kill them quickly and humanely.
Well, I wonder whether the best thing to do would be to send Jacob Rees-Mogg out to lecture to them for a while and bore them to death.
I just suspect he's not very good in the bush. Like, I can't really picture him, going off the beaten track and getting stuck in.
No, I think you could be right.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough paved roads for New Zealand.
But anyway, we don't get political. We don't like that sort of thing.
So do you think it's generally improving then in New Zealand and Australia then, Nat? Awareness of animal welfare and the general attitude?
Especially in New Zealand, we have very, very strong animal welfare laws. They've definitely improved significantly just in the 20 years that I've been out of vet school as well. There's a charity that looks across the world at animal welfare legislation on a country level basis. I'm thinking they used to be the World Society for the Protection of Animals. And I can't remember what they've changed to, but they had a name change. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was their website that I explored a few years back. But where New Zealand and Australia slightly fall down is this issue around, and it's cats are a really good example of that, because we have pet cats that are much loved, and then we have feral cats that are not loved.
Sorry, you say pit cats, but cats who live in pits, are they?
Yeah, they're out mining.
Yeah.
Yep.
What?
Sorry, I used to have a New Zealand girlfriend, and I'd rib her all the time about not being able to say pen or pin.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few others that we won't use as examples on this.
Can you pass me a pin? So I pass her a little pin and she'd try and bite it. He's scratching the paper. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
It's actually World Animal Protection, it's now known as.
That's it.
Which was the World Society for the Prevention of, anyway.
Yeah.
So
but no, their websites definitely, it's really interesting to sort of dig into that and just the variety, and obviously some countries don't have any legislation at all that protects animals. My understanding is there's definitely a trend. The better the human rights are in place in the country, usually animal welfare follows along behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you said just then, Nathalie, 20 years ago, vet school.
This is
Tell us about vet school.
So it was in New Zealand. I went to New Zealand's premier vet school. We only have one.
I was going to say, that's Massey, isn't it?
Yeah. So when did I start? 1997 through to 2002 I graduated. So
was that the local vet school?
No, I had to leave home. So by that point we were living in Auckland, so I left Auckland at 18, and my parents put me on a train, and I went down to Palmerston North, which I think is about 6 hours on the train. Palmerston North is we have lots of attractive places in New Zealand, and Palmerston North isn't necessarily on the bucket list of places to visit, but it has its perks. It's very flat.
Okay.
And there's a nice river.
Insalubrious, but very flat. I don't think any part of New Zealand is very flat, because we know it through watching Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and things.
Yeah, none of them is filmed in Palmerston North.
They live there.
That's where Bilbo lives. Yeah, I've seen that documentary.
Yeah, it gets hilly south of Palmerston North. So between Palmerston North and Wellington, it's a bit hillier.
Okay.
But, it's I mean, it's fun. Vet school, I think, was a bit rowdy, possibly more so than it is now. But we had quite a lot of fun. And because most people, I think there was one person in my class that actually grew up in Palmerston North, so the rest of us were all imports as such. So it kind of creates quite a nice atmosphere in that sense. And I'm currently, I think it actually is this weekend, I'm missing our 20-year anniversary celebrations. Unfortunately, with COVID and all the rest of it, I couldn't quite get back.
So 18 years old, you packed off on the train. So when did that journey actually start?
Gosh, probably at about 5 or 6 years of age. We'd gone on holiday, we'd gone camping, and our cats didn't come camping with us, so they'd gone into a boarding cattery. And we went to pick them up, and I said to my mum, I want to run a cat house when I'm older. Cat house may not be the appropriate term.
Different connotations, I think, aren't they?
Different connotations. That was the point where she said, why don't you become a vet instead? And I went, okay. And never really changed my mind. So yeah, I always wanted to do with animals.
Vet or prostitution is always
Well, I still slightly think that, maybe I should have just ran a cattery. And
I think the hours are better, aren't they?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder. I'm like, maybe if she said, that's nice, dear. I might have had quite a different career path.
So at 18 then, rocking up to Massey was sort of almost, getting your results through and getting an acceptance, or it must have almost been I've done it.
Well, we're a little bit different in New Zealand, or at least we were then. So to get into the first semester of vet school, you basically just had to have passed your final year of high school, and so there was no entry requirements really for that first semester. So actually that first semester was the one where you get into vet school. So I think we had sort of 250 odd, doing that first semester and applying for vet school, and then there's 70 places. So yeah, I potted off to vet school, but then had to work exceedingly hard for possibly the hardest of, the thesis writing was quite hard too. But yeah, up until before then, that was the hardest I've ever worked, was that first, 6 months to really ensure that I got into vet school.
So it's a 6-month veterinary apprentice.
Almost, yeah. So you do sort of general science subjects, and then I think we did 2 types of biology, and physics and chemistry, and then you also do, used to call it an aptitude test, which I vaguely remember being sort of like a multi-choice kind of problem-solving IQ test, and those 5 things are what makes up your grade. So when you talk to students now and they talk about their interviews, I just look slightly confused because we didn't have anything like that. You basically had to turn up and get the grades, and you had to have done. You basically had to have spent some time in a vet practice, so done at least a week as a high school student, sort of seeing what things were like. But I'd had a job for my last year and a half of high school, working in a vet clinic after school, doing the tea making and the cleaning and all of that kind of stuff.
The real work.
The real work, yeah. I was used to, putting bloodstained drapes through the wash, and this was the time where, especially larger syringes, we would still clean them out and re-sterilize them for subcutaneous injections.
Yeah, I remember doing that when I was 10 or 11, working at a vet at a weekend, and testing how sharp the needles were as well. You drag the needles across your thumbnail, and if they caught, they were blunt, you throw them away. The rest of them you put in this huge, great drum and autoclave.
So we weren't quite that bad. We did have some used needles by that point, but yeah.
Oh, you had a sharpening stone to sharpen the needles, did you?
Actually, you jest, but the head vet did.
Yeah.
He had these beautiful needles and glass syringes, wonderful ground glass syringes.
And they're in a display cabinet at the top of the stairs in his practice.
They are. But he would sharpen these needles before. Well, I think probably every weekend. I don't think he did more often than that. And some of them were that long. The newer ones were, 1.5 inches long. And some of the ones he used for many years were about 0.5 centimetre long. He used those for cats and rabbits.
Oh, that's my favourite one, that one is. Yeah.
It's just hard to imagine, isn't it? But definitely at that time, the larger syringes were still quite expensive. So you definitely saved your 5 and 10 ml syringes, and they'd only go in the bin when you really couldn't work out how much stuff you were drawing up. So every week a few of them would get siphoned off. And
you'd use something like Sinulox, which would gum it up, wouldn't it? So you knew that you couldn't use that with anything else.
Yeah, gosh, yeah, the Sinulox ones. And then occasionally some of them would obviously had an abscess drained, and I'd be like, what am I cleaning here? Yeah. it was fun though, and I was really lucky because the practice was just between my high school and where my parents lived, so it was easy to commute, so it was good.
That's cool.
The worrying thing is that around the 1960s, that was still happening with the human side of things. There wasn't much in the way of plastic syringes back then either, was there? So
No.
they might have had glass or Bakelite ones, but they were all reused.
And we'll get back to those one day soon.
We will.
Well, it's kind of not so, something we should consider, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, if you can clean them out properly and re-sterilize them, is there a difference? We definitely, I've noticed this over the last 20 years, the amount of plastic we're throwing away day to day in our jobs is just exponential. I mean, when I first started, at least everything was cloth drapes, and we were wrapping and going for our little autoclave, all kind of packaged up with just a bit of tape holding it together, and now everything's in bags. And yeah, I'm not sure. It might be better for the patients. I'm not sure.
It's a difficult equation, really, isn't it? Because some of the stuff we do to reduce infection, and with the rise of the superbug, there is always going to be that requirement. On the flip side of it, the more plastic we use and throw away, the worse it is for the planet. And it's sort of this. We mentioned that the other day in a chat, wasn't it? It's the consequences of our actions, and how well-meaning actions have sometimes got an unrecognised consequence just around the corner.
It's Newton's. Now, which law is that?
Third law, isn't it?
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
I think it's his third law, isn't it?
I don't think he ever intended it. I think it was his third. Yeah, I don't think he ever intended it for environmental health and care. But it's true. It's true. We do all these things with, I'm putting quotes here, the best of intentions.
It is indeed Newton's third law of motion.
There we go.
Is Mike in charge of the Google?
Every action has an equal and opposite
reaction.
Yeah. I know what we can do. What we could do is we could go to the internet and look it all up. The only problem with the internet, of course, is that whilst we have the whole encyclopedia of human knowledge all encompassed on the internet, all we ever do is look at cat videos.
We do. And why not?
Why wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know.
Because do you
like cats? Do you like cats, Nathalie?
I do quite like cats. Yeah.
What got you into cats then? Was it the internet?
No, because I'm really old and internet wasn't around. No, I just had pet cats.
Right.
And my friends had cats, and the neighbours had cats, and I stalked all of them.
Should you be saying that?
I'm that's well known. My cat stalking tendencies are not something that has ever been hidden.
Yeah, I saw that Netflix documentary, Don't Fuck with Cats.
I haven't watched that one yet, actually. My sister told me to watch it, but
you have to watch it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I could cope.
It's superb. Without spoiling things too much, a guy posted a pretty obscene cat harm video on the internet, and that upset a number of people, surprise surprise, who decided that they were going to track him down.
Right.
And as we've discussed numerous times, the harming of cats often carries on, or the harming of animals carries on to harm to humans.
But it is true that there is this huge connection, isn't there, Nathalie, between animal abuse and human abuse. And we're all, as vets, asked to be mindful of this when we see unexpected or unexplained injuries, traumas in cats.
Definitely, it's you're right, it's well documented. And the other thing that is also is sort of associated with that is people in abusive relationships struggle to leave because it's often the children and the pets that are the things that are keeping them in the relationship. So both the Dogs Trust and Cats Protection and RSPCA have all been involved in the UK in various schemes to sort of help, in that sense, provide a place for the animals to be short-term, to enable people to get themselves out of situations safely. Do
you ever get involved in that, Nat?
I did when I worked at Cats Protection. So we did used to have some of the cats come through in our care. I'm trying to remember the name of the scheme. At that time, it was administered by Dogs Trust, but Cats Protection's now doing it on their own. So yeah, we did have cats in our care, sometimes for a couple of months while situations are being sorted out.
Right.
We seldom got histories with them, but sometimes we did. And definitely, at least one of the ones that I can remember in my care, it had 2 incidents where it had presented to the vet clinic with injuries. Had it been hit by a car, had it fallen out of a tree. Knowing the back history, you start to wonder if there's a third option, obviously, there as well. So, yeah, it's definitely, it's a nice thing that, those links are now really recognised and established, and that there's charitable groups really working to help support people in those situations, because it's devastating for them, and having to leave your pet for a period of time, it's really hard. Often refuges are able to help and take in people and the children, but you can understand why they can't always take the pets in as well.
Yeah.
And our thoughts go at the moment, of course, to the Ukrainian war. And those poor people who lost everything, their families, their houses, and their pets. And I'm not tearing any of those, but they're all as important to various of them as every other part.
Yeah. How long were you at Cats Protection?
So I worked for Cats Protection for 3.5 years. So they, at the head sort of site, National Cat Centre, they have a small clinic attached to the adoption centre there. So I ran that with 2 nurses for 3.5 years. So it was nice, actually. It was sort of nice. Well, it was about as 9 to 5 as a vet job ever gets, to be honest. And it was that kind of, you don't have full autonomy over your cases, obviously. It's in collaboration, not with the owner, but with the managers of the cattery. But, your decision-making was around what was best for that cat with the resources you had available at the charity, which is a little bit different from private practice, in the sense that your decision-making is what's best for the cat with what the owner's able to do, and that's their resources, their time, their money, their commitment. So yeah, it was it was a nice job, actually, and I quite like a little bit of surgery. I'm more of a medic than a surgeon, but because often in those circumstances it's me, I'm the person to give stuff a go. So it was nice to be able to do that as well and do a bit more surgery.
Did that job follow on from Edinburgh then?
No. So, so I locumed up to 2009, and then I decided to get a proper job. So I went and worked for a hospital practice for about 2 years. So I did a mixture between the main hospital work and a branch work. And then the Cats Protection job came up while I was there. So I applied for that. And while I'd been there, I'd done the Sydney University distance education course in Feline Medicine. So I was just finishing that up at the time the CP job got advertised. So I think that helped me get that job. And then I was there for 3.5 years. And then I was signing up to start Edinburgh about the time I left there. So I actually started the Edinburgh Masters when I was working at the RBC. So I went from Cats Protection to the RBC, and they were establishing the shelter medicine program at that point. So I took on the feline shelter work that they had. So I worked in North London at an RSPCA branch. So I was in there 2 to 3 days a week with the students. So we were sort of teaching them preventative healthcare, neutering, vaccinations, just examining a lot of cats. And so they were doing that alongside us doing the work in the shelter there. And then while I was there, we also picked up some work with Wood Green. So I was usually 2 days at the RSPCA and 1 day at Wood Green, and then the rest of the time at the hospital.
A famous animal shelter, the Wood Green Animal Shelter.
Yeah, in Wood Green.
Wood Green in London, absolutely.
Yeah. No, they've been there a long time. A lot of these charities are just so interesting with their history and how they came about being established. So I think Wood Green did a lot of work during the war, actually, helping pets that had been abandoned. And I remember seeing photos. They had a little sort of push bike with a kind of basket on the top of it that they would use to transport animals.
This would be the Second World War that you're referring to.
Yeah, possibly the first, actually.
Right. Okay.
Probably the second, in the sense that there was more bombing of London in the
I was going to say, I was talking to some youngsters fairly recently, and I realised that the war didn't mean the same to them as it did to me.
Yes.
Yeah. They would the war. Oh, you mean Iraq or the Falklands?
Really?
Yeah. it's almost as if the 1940s have moved sort of 2 generations or 3 generations outside of the general consciousness.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I guess people of my age and older. I mean, I had a grandfather that fought in the war from New Zealand, so we're probably the last ones that have more of that, not quite direct link, but yeah.
I guess so. Although I must say, when people mention the war, I think, is it the Punic Wars or the Boer War?
Don't mention the Boer War.
Well, yeah, I always think of the land wars, the Maori wars in New Zealand, so it must get confusing.
Yeah.
Or the Punic Wars, Apagina, Yandu, Masaki, Kurawana, as I believe the Aeneid Book 4 begins. Happy times. No, bad times. I've just been checking as I did that because I can multitask. Wood Green opened in 1924, so it was the
Second World War. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. No, there was.
This is quite good using Google.
Yeah.
We haven't done it before.
Usually, because we've been so dyspraxic that we're unable to do anything other than stare at the screen and press the wrong button in case we stop recording by mistake or something.
So, Nathalie, didn't I see somewhere recently you obviously enjoy your shelter medicine and the animal welfare aspect of that. Did I see that you've been travelling and doing work on neuter clinics recently?
Yes, yeah, I still do try and keep a paw in, I guess. So recently, I've been there a number of times now, but I did a TNR trip to Portugal to a charity that, through various friends, I've kind of known of for a long time, and then I've been doing bits and bobs with them probably for about 8 years, I think.
Right.
And so I have some exceedingly wonderful vet nurse friends that organise everything. So I basically just get told when to turn up and get handed a plane ticket, which is great.
Wow.
But no, we did a week of neutering in Portugal. And yeah, really, it was a very successful trip. It was lovely. Although I'm too old for this, did get mentioned a couple of times on day 2 and 3 when my back went, what are you doing?
All right. Okay.
I did it
all day. What are you doing?
I did it in Greece for a month 20 odd years ago, and I was back broken every day. There's no rise and fall operating table. There's someone's kitchen table.
We have good facilities, at least. We do have that. So we've got it's a really nice setup that this charity in Portugal has. So yeah, that's part of the reason why we like to go back regularly. And nice association with the town, and the municipal vet popped in to say hi, and it's a nice little sort of setup.
You develop those contacts, don't you, and those relationships.
Yeah. And it's sort of one of those things. So I really don't do much of it anymore, but I still enjoy spaying a cat.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity there for any students to join you, or
not from the UK as such, but we did have a Portuguese vet student with us this time. So I was teaching her. She was great, actually. She ended up doing most of the closes for me. So we were able to sort of speed things up. I did the sort of spay, and then she was doing the closure. So that was great. And then previous times that I've been there, we have had other vet students as well coming in. So she had been doing some EMS at the local practice in the town, and heard that we were coming the following week. So came to join us, which was great. Yeah.
Just to ask the nitty-gritty question here, because I've heard it from both sides and I've got my own view. Do the neutering programs work?
If you're consistent. So you need quite a lot of things in place. So just turning up, spaying 10 cats and pottering off again isn't really going to do a lot. So you need to be neutering 70 to 80% of them, and you need to be targeting the females. So this group in Portugal are really experienced. They are exceedingly good trappers, to the point where I'm like, no, not another spay, for goodness sake, catch a boy. They do a really good job. And so it's interesting because there's been probably intensive work there, regular neutering programs. I think things have fallen down a little bit with COVID in recent years, but at least an annual to biannual sort of campaign. But still, we still had 109 cats we did in the week. So yeah, there's there's still a lot of them, but they're really good at recognizing the colonies, working out who lives in that colony. They have the feeders on board for the whole situation. So we try and do a colony at a time. So we're not just doing 5 cats from here, 10 cats from there. We're going in and neutering that colony and then moving on to the next one. But
that was the problem I had when I went to Greece 20 years ago. I was in Thessaloniki, and I would do a week there and then go to one of the islands and then go to another part of the mainland and then back to Thessaloniki. And I thought, actually, I'm doing nothing here. I'm taking the crust off this adult population, and it's soon going to be filled, all too soon. Yeah. So I convinced myself that I was doing some good, but I think really my month would have been better in one area, as you say.
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is at least you're doing some good to the individual animal. So the ones that you do neuter, especially the females, you're enabling them to probably have a longer, healthier life, because they're not, even in this week I had a couple of quite funky uteruses. So these cats really did benefit from being spayed. But yeah, definitely to make a difference at a population level, you need this really dedicated, and it's hard work. I mean, it's people doing the trapping. They're really, if you don't have that right, it doesn't matter how many that we're doing at the other end. It needs to be that population.
Incredibly dedicated group of people, isn't it?
Very passionate, very passionate.
Yeah, quite humbling seeing the level of interest that goes into care for the wider community of animals in countries that we perceive, perhaps outwardly, as not being animal lovers.
Definitely Portugal, the people that we deal with are massive animal lovers. As the village that we stay in, they love a small dog. There's a lot of small dogs. But yeah, even within these cats, and the vast majority of them are not handleable. They are, street cats verging on feral. So they tolerate people being in their vicinity, but don't want physical interaction at all with you. And they still cared for they are ridiculously fat. Like, you're thinking when you're doing street cats, you shouldn't be spaying some of these, really. You're like, how on earth? But they are cared for, sometimes a little bit too much in that sense.
Yeah. And fatter, of course, during the tourist season.
Yes, although I think in this village it's just year round, because it's this place does have tourists, but less perhaps than some of the Greek islands especially. So you definitely see that rise and fall during end of cat populations in tourist areas especially. And I think COVID probably did have quite an impact on that as well. The worry was a lot of these cats weren't being neutered, but actually if the tourists aren't there feeding them, they're probably not producing as many kittens. So
swings again. The right thing for the wrong reason, or the wrong thing. A lot of people might not be familiar with ISFM.
No.
And that is, of course, where you work. You're one of the ambassadors for ISFM. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. So ISFM is interesting. So it's the International Society of Feline Medicine. And we are part of a wider charity. So we're part of International Cat Care, which, when we sort of describe who we are as a charity, essentially we're an educational charity about cats. And then the ISFM side of it is the veterinary education side of things. So we run a veterinary membership society and offer hopefully everything the vet needs to know about cats if they're a member. So we have regular webinars, a forum space where you can ask advice and questions from people far smarter than me. And I sometimes attempt to help, but probably make things worse.
I doubt.
I try and give supportive. You're doing great. And now Sam's going to say something really smart. But yeah, we have that. We've started post-lockdown, given how familiar we've all become with Zoom. We run a clinical club each month as well, which is really fun. We get some of our members presenting a case and just have a lot of general discussion. People can ask questions. So it's quite nice. We sort of choose a topic each month and just have quite a good chat really about it. So they're going well. And then we have our fabulous journal, the Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery. And
absolutely brilliant. A must for everyone to read.
A must for everyone that needs to know about cats. And the exciting news, which I can kind of announce now because we're in that process, is we're actually converting it into an open access journal next year. So all vets all around the world will be able to access articles going forward, but also the back catalogue will also become free to view as well. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So it's really exciting, and it's it's sort of something that we're making some changes to ISFM membership, because the journal, printed journal, has historically been part of the benefits of being a member, but we're trying to do what we can globally to improve cat welfare, and so making the journal open access is a really important step in that. And then for our members, I had a lovely meeting this afternoon with your podcast producer, because we're going to start doing our own podcast, and part of that will be interviewing some of the authors for JFMS, especially for the clinical reviews. So there's some exciting things coming.
Oh wow! Your own ISFM podcast.
While I'm plugging, the other thing that's now a massive benefit of being an ISFM member is
see what we've started, Julian.
I know.
Everybody's doing it.
It's the sales.
We're trendsetters. We always have been. Yeah. Everyone's going to be bald, old, and overweight soon.
That's really cool. So what are the plans on that, Nathalie, if you can give without giving too much away?
Well, we're also making a big part of our membership benefit access to our congresses as well. So members have always had a discount to come in person to the congress, but we're recording everything this year, and they'll be able to basically get a virtual ticket as part of their membership. So those that can't join us in person in Rhodes, if you're an ISFM member, you'll be able to catch up on everything from the recordings.
Is there any stuff that the ISFM does for general public as well as supporting the veterinary industry?
Yes, most of our main website is actually all health advice and information for members of the general public. So we find a lot of vets do refer their owners to our website. Our most popular term, though, is I'm thinking about getting a cat. So that's one of our pages that kind of pops up the most. And so within that, there's some really good general advice, things to consider about getting a cat. And we've also worked with some of the other charities in the UK to create something called the Kitten Checklist, which is kind of a good thing to sort of work through, regardless of where you're going to get your cat, whether you're going to a shelter, to a breeder, or you're purchasing it through someone local that just has a litter of kittens. It just gives you a really good run through of all of the sort of sensible questions you need to ask to just make sure you're getting a happy, healthy kitten, really.
Are there any tips there on how to kidnap one of the local cats?
Generally, we encourage to avoid that. So we do have advice about if you come across a stray cat, and this is not the neighbour's cat that you've been enticing into your house with food. We definitely advise if the neighbour's cat comes a visiting, don't feed them. Otherwise, you'll end up with another cat. But yeah, there is advice about what to do when you've found a strange cat, which generally is take them to the vets and check to see if they're microchipped and try and find their owner. And then if they don't have a microchip, paper collars are really a good idea. Pop a paper collar on them with your details, and then probably the cat will go back to his owner and you'll get a phone call to say it's all fine.
Great. And you give practical advice as well for giving medication, don't you? So
yes.
How to use inhalers. A lot of cats are asthmatic.
Yeah, we've got the training videos for those. There's some various videos about how to medicate as well. And we've just been involved actually with a study that's been published working with the wonderful Sarah Caney, Danielle Gunn-Moore, looking at all of the issues around giving medication. So that's been really helpful to just really get a broad sort of sense of what's going on, what are the problems that owners have with medicating their cats, which, I mean, we talked briefly about antibiotic resistance earlier, and you know, that's a massive issue. We want to make sure if we're prescribing things like antibiotics, they're finishing their course. So there's so much on our website. The only thing that we're really working on improving is making it a little bit more searchable. So in the health terms, you need to use things like the term cystitis rather than the cat is weeing on my bed. So it's sometimes a little bit of direction from their vets about what the medical term is makes things a little bit easier to find.
Right.
Absolutely. And actually, as a timely reminder for me to say to cat owners who aren't vets or in the profession at all, please don't always expect the vet to give antibiotics. Trust us when we say, no, I think on this occasion, Tiddles doesn't need antibiotics. if we lose those antibiotics, then we're not going to get them back. So we need to take care of them.
And definitely there's so many conditions in cats that maybe in people antibiotics use is appropriate, but cystitis is a really, really good example of that. Bacterial cystitis in cats, exceedingly uncommon. And so, there is reasons why we're not giving antibiotics for those ones, because they're not going to do any good, and it makes your cat more stressed out trying to give it tablets.
And the stress is probably what causes cystitis in the first place.
It's often a trigger with the idiopathic cystitis cases, yes.
So essentially then, ISFM are transitioning to a digital platform.
We are, yes. Yeah, we've got a lot going on at the moment to get our digital platform ready by the end of the year.
Wow.
So we've already done the first step with our forum space and our libraries full of protocols and previous recordings from congresses and webinars. Basically, if you're interested in cats, become a member and you can pretty much do hundreds of hours of CPD on cats, which will keep the Royal College really happy for quite some time.
Well,
it will.
Now, glad you've mentioned this.
Yes.
Natalie, have you come across 60-second CPD?
I have. I was pre-warned about 60-second CPD, so I've written some notes.
Warned?
What, you mean cherished through the process?
Advised?
Advised, warned.
Warned? Okay, so Nathalie Dowgray, what are you going to give us a 60-second CPD on?
Well, 60-second CPD is going to be on welcoming a cat into the consult room.
Right. Okay. Here we go. Then let's set you up. Here's your clock.
Oh, okay. So, you're going to have to just yell when I'm done.
On today's 60-second CPD challenge, Nathalie Dowgray from the ISFM on welcoming a cat into the consult room, starting now.
Okay, step 1, invite the owner and the cat to come into your consult room. And then, depending on the size of your room, you can either place the carrier on the examination table, on the floor, a chair if you've got one, or if you're lucky and have a little cat tree, then place them on there. Next thing you want to do is open the door to the carrier. And then you're going to ignore the cat. Don't look at the cat, ignore the cat. Just open the door, walk away. Talk to the owner, gather your history, find out why they're there today, get a feel for what's going on with the cat. But while you're ignoring the cat, with half an eye, just kind of keep an eye on them, see what they're doing. Don't stare at them. Cats don't like being stared at, but watch what they're doing. If the cat's confident and comes out, then allow them to approach you. Greet them with a soft hand. So this is the example of a soft hand. Allow them to sniff and then incite further contact if they wish. If they don't want to come out, move the cat onto the examination table, have a large towel ready, take the lid off the carrier, drape the towel over half of it, and allow the cat to come out if they wish to.
Wow. So there's 30 seconds. Perfect time.
I know. I didn't get my last sentence. My last sentence was if the cat doesn't wish to come out and the carrier lid doesn't come off, that's a lot longer than 60 seconds. That's a very long CPD. That's a good 5-minute one.
But that's life. That's life.
Yeah.
So the only question I have there is how, for those viewers who aren't viewing, in other words, the listeners, how would you describe a soft hand?
Well, I need to find exactly how we've described it. We're writing some guidelines at the moment, which include an actual description of a soft hand. But basically, I'm going to be demonstrating again and trying to talk through it. Hand out, fingers slightly curved, thumb down generally. There we go. Where's my hand there? Some people like to curl the top finger slightly, but just soft, basically. So relaxed hand, not pointy, not jabby, just sort of curved slightly.
So it's a sort of beckoning hand, isn't it? If you beckon someone, you do it with bent fingers.
It is. It's a beckoning hand, but not waving.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sort of like proffering a wet fish handshake.
It is almost. That's a really good description of it. A wet fish handshake. Yeah. And then don't shove it under the cat's nose. Allow the cat to lean forward and sniff.
Do you do the long blink smile at a cat?
I do sometimes do the smize. So yeah, if you do make eye contact with the cat, then slow blink and then look away. And if you're lucky, they'll give you a slow blink back. It's sort of like the cat version of WhatsApp. Just another plug that in November we will be publishing the updated cat-friendly interaction guidelines. And so they are replacing our handling guidelines, which are now 11 years old. So look out for those coming out in November, and there'll be far more detailed information about how to get a cat into the consult room, out of its basket, examine it. All of this whilst the cat is still very, very happy.
That's brilliant. And I have to add to that
whilst pretending you're ignoring it completely.
Yes. Well,
yeah, but don't ignore the owner.
Don't ignore it.
Corner of your eye.
Corner of your eye, but don't stare.
Yeah, and don't ignore the owner, because they're going to pay the bill.
ISFM are widely regarded as being the repository for information of how to make your cat a cat-friendly practice, so much so that you can become an ISFM rated cat-friendly practice, which we are in the process of so doing.
Brilliant.
And I mean, you guys, I was going to say you guys, and I hesitate, but I'll say you guys are absolutely brilliant. The work that ISFM has done and the advice it's given to the other organisations, the animal welfare organisations, the legislative organisations, has been second to none. And for that, I would produce a CPD certificate. However, I'm not, because it's just for your CPD lectures today. Here we go.
Come on. What you got, Jim?
This is Certificate of Feline Prowess.
Oh, nice.
And this certifies that a cat's the only cat that knows where it's at, to paraphrase the Aristocats. So what do we have? We have my little old cat there, Jimmy, much loved and much missed. A pet cat, you see there. And then we have, you can just see, there's a cat in Crete. Almost similar looking cat, but I wonder who had the best life. Because this little cat was quite thin and frail and had a sore tail. We got it some veterinary treatment when we were staying out in Greece. It's all you needed. And then you get at the bottom of the page, this, and we know what this is, don't we? This is a Savannah cat.
Yes.
And this is almost as big as a Labrador. It's a huge cat. Fortunately, it didn't mind me injecting it, because if it did mind me injecting it, I may still be in hospital. And we're seeing a few of these, and I think ISFM have produced some good advice.
Yeah, and we're actually working with a charitable group at the moment. So probably by the time this goes live, we are going to be running a survey, because we're just really interested to see how many vets are actually seeing in practice. So it's really interesting to know that you guys are starting to see some through your practice. Yeah,
they're frightening animals. They really are. You get a thing with 20 blades on it, and it's the size of an animal. Anyway, I digress. You mentioned in your bio that you weren't just about cats; you also liked food and beaches. So here's some food and a beach, and this is
brilliant.
A seafood platter that I made for my lovely wife last year for our anniversary. There's a beach in Greece. That altogether is a CPD certificate for your wonderful 60-second CPD.
Julian, don't forget, because we do have the opportunity here for our listeners to actually present a whole hour or more of CPD. However, we do need a reflective question.
Ooh.
So, have you got a question, Nathalie, that you could ask our audience so that they could reflect on what we've talked about tonight and present an hour's CPD to the RCVS?
Oh, okay. The thing that I think is always important to reflect on is, what can you do better with the cats in your clinic? What small change can you make?
Brilliant question.
And if you want further information to help with that reflection, please do visit the Cat Friendly Clinic website.
I was just about to say, and if you want help with that reflection or want an answer to that, then I can think of no better place than the ISFM in order to help you with that. That is absolutely fantastic, Nathalie. Thank you very much indeed.
Wow, we like to talk about the cat-friendly evolution, and definitely I've always considered myself quite a cat-friendly vet, but I look back and I've evolved a lot over the last 10 years. So you can always be doing things different and better, and
there's always something to learn.
Perfect. Yeah.
There is always something to learn. As vets, of course. Well, I guess in life we learn new stuff almost every day. Someone said to me once, you learn something new every day, but actually last Tuesday week I learned nothing at all.
No.
But I think you didn't either, did you, Mike?
No, not last Tuesday.
No.
No, last Tuesday was rubbish.
Rubbish. But a few years back, I learned quite a lot from an elderly client of mine who brought 2 cats in, both of whom were suffering from organophosphate poisoning. And clearly, they'd come in contact with some flea killers that weren't designed for cats. So I asked him what he'd used, and he said, I used Neuvan Stay Kill. Do you remember that? Neuvan Stay Kill? Big yellow tube. You would just buy it to kill wasps because that was about the only thing you could do with it. Not the same as Neuvan Top, which was this most unfriendly cat flea spray that I think would frighten the fleas as much as it frightened cats. This usually sprayed over. That was designed for topical use. Neuvan Stay Kill was designed for the carpets, and you couldn't use it on cats. And this guy had read the back of the can and knew that you couldn't use it on cats, and yet his cats were suffering from organophosphate poisoning. So, how could this be? How can you have read the back of the can, know that you can't use them on your cats, and yet clearly they're almost dead because they're suffering from the effects of it? He said, well, it's because I sprayed the inside of an Hessian bag. I always like this use of the an there. An Hessian bag with the substance. Put the cats in it and shook them around for 5 minutes.
Wow.
He might as well added a brick, tied the lid of the Hessian sack and dropped them in the canal.
I know. My God, what a
I don't know.
Twerp. The cats both survived. I have to say, they were under an anaesthetic for a very long time while we were waiting for the effects of the poison to wear off. We swore vegan them. We washed them in detergent several times, and we suggested to the chap that he didn't ever treat them for fleas again, other than with a flea comb, which he probably used to perforate them. I don't know.
Well, on that happy note.
The lesson for that was, I think, quite easy. When writing foolproof instructions, never underestimate how foolish some people can be. And I think your directions with ISFM for making a cat-friendly practice are about as foolproof as you can get. So well done for your plain language there.
It's all right. We're working actually to make them even more simple because at the moment there's still probably some wording that falls down in translation, because that's the other thing we have to remember. We are, cat-friendly clinic has become exceedingly international, and so a lot of our materials now get translated, and the term practice does not translate well, hence cat-friendly clinic. But it's still slipped into some of our writing, so we're making a real effort as we just make some changes as we go through this sort of digital transformation, that we make sure we're also using words that translate easily as well.
Something will slip through, I'm sure. It always does.
Sure.
Sure. No, that's brilliant. But anyway, on that happy note of surviving cats and all the great work that ISFM is doing, I'm afraid it's time to bring it to a close. We're going to have to change our sign out, I think, Julian.
Oh yes, I think we will.
Yeah. But if you've enjoyed what you've heard, then don't forget to click like, share, and please subscribe, because it really does help. It makes a difference. So, Nathalie Dowgray, ISFM, thank you very much indeed, and may your cat go with you.
Go with you. May your cat go with you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Yes.
You take care.